thank you very much for joining me. My name is Abi Reader and I am a mixed farmer down in South Wales. So you have joined me at the moment in my dairy cow shed. The cow's currently out in the field. So we mainly do dairy cows. We're milking about 180 cows here. But we've also got about 100 sheep. We grow some crops and we do some beef. So if I took each of those into isolation, we have beef because we have dairy cows. So ultimately, sometimes we have dairy cows that will throw calves that we're not going to put into the dairy herd and we'll put into beef production. And actually, the dairy industry here in the UK produces almost 50% of the total beef output that we have. So that's why we have beef. We have got arable crops on some of the best areas of our farm. So my farm is just over 700 acres, and to help you visualise that, 1 acre is the size of a football pitch. So we've got roughly 700 acres. Now our very, very best land goes down to crops, and that's because the soils are capable of growing those crops, they're capable of doing them well, and it's obviously a very good income. So our very best land we put down to crops. But remember, we're still in Wales, so although we do have some great weather most of the time, occasionally it's a little bit wet. So it's not the best for your fruit and veg. We're not typically known in Wales for fruit and veg. That's not to say we don't have it, but not typically known for us. So the usual crops we get here in Wales are wheat, barley on this farm, and also we grow maize. And actually we grow these crops for our animals. Again, we don't have good enough soils and we don't have good enough climate here in Wales to grow crops to a human grade standard, or certainly on this farm anyway. We just couldn't support it. So we're using it to grow crops for our animals. So then on our better ground, we will have dairy cows and also some of our beef animals. And then I'm afraid on our worst ground, that's where we put our sheep. And we do have some pretty poor ground. So I'm in the Vale of Glamorgan, and it's generally called the breadbasket of Wales because it does have some very good soil and some very good farming capabilities. But even here, we do have some poor ground. And if we talk about ground particularly, I have places where the bedrock is perhaps 6 foot below the surface. And I have other places where the bedrock is up to a foot above the surface. And it's in fields like that where we can't really support anything other than grass, and it's too far to get the cows to. That's where we'll keep our sheep. So we are a traditional mixed farm, and I think that works really well because each enterprise complements the other. We're here in our dairy shed. This is our most modern building on the farm. It's approximately 3 years old. And it really does have all the mod cons for our cows. So during the winter time, when it's too wet for the cows to be out, and we are on quite heavy clay soils on the dairy ground, so when it does get wet, my goodness, does it get wet. It's to the extent that even you wouldn't want to walk across it because you will get stuck. So then the cows come in. Hopefully that won't be for another month, and hopefully it will be as short a period as possible. But when they do come in, they come into here, into the real mod cons. And we've taken, our theme today is talking about how we can be much more climate friendly and how we can be a lot more carbon conscious. And I'll show you shortly some of our older sheds, but we need to remember that we don't live in old stone buildings without plastered walls and without running water and electricity anymore, and neither should our animals. And being able to give them a shed like this with the ventilation, the lighting, I think you can see the skylights here up above me. We have ventilation through a slit here. Whoops, if I can get my finger in the right place. Through a slit there in the roof. So that's encouraging the cooler air to come in from the sides through these slats. And it will come over the tops of the cows, and then it will exit through that gap in the roof, in the ceiling. And it just encourages this complete circular effect all the time. So the cows are always in some really fresh air, and that is so important. So I'm going to walk outside, and I'm going to warn you, it's quite sunny here today, which is great for here in Wales, but I hope I don't blind you on the camera. I was going to turn around over in this direction. Behind me are the cows, but I suspect if I turn around you're going to get blinded by the sunshine, so I might avoid that for a minute. But what I wanted to show you was behind me here, this big tub. This is our feeder wagon. So when the cows are in the winter and they're not grazing grass, they have to eat crops that we've grown for them. And we need to be able to mix it properly, just like we do at home. We'll mix and cook our own food. So we use this feeder wagon. And in terms of, if we're sticking on the theme now of carbon footprint and what we're doing here on the farm, to be much better at what we do. This weigh scales here may look pretty unimpressive. It's behind a waterproof screen there. But that is there to do absolutely precision feeding for the cows. We don't want any waste. Waste is really bad, and we're working on that, aren't we, in our own households. We're trying to make sure that we recycle all our waste properly. It's exactly the same when you're feeding an animal. So we need to make sure that the cows are getting a really balanced diet. We're not wasting any of those ingredients. If we overfeed a cow a certain ingredient, maybe like a protein, all she's going to do is dung it out the back end. It's a waste. We don't want that. So we're using all sorts of precision technology like that. There's another piece of technology just here behind me. This isn't mine, unfortunately. I'd love to say it was. It belongs to a contractor, but it's another great way for farms to utilize some really good technology. Even if you can't afford it yourself, you can share it with other people, you can hire it in, you can hire in expertise, and that's really good. Walking behind me now, and this is a fairly quick tour, isn't it? But this is my milking parlour here behind me, which we're probably not going to get time to go into today because I have a few other bits and pieces that I want to show you. First up, just behind me here, you will see a few cows. This is our maternity ward. So this is for cows that are approximately 3 weeks off calving. So I make sure they come in from the fields then so I can keep an eye on them, because if there's any complications, and just like humans, there will always be the unexpected. I want to know that they're nearby and that I can give them the treatment that they need if they have it. So they still get to see the sunlight, and they've just had breakfast there now this morning, so they're happy eating. One of the food products that we make here on the farm, and I've put one out here just so you can have a look at it. I'm sure you see plenty of these around on different farms, is this round black container, if you like. It's a bale. It's a bale of grass, and it's wrapped in plastic. And I've put it out here to highlight to you. So one of my ambitions as a farmer is to reduce the amount of plastic that we're using. And there are challenges for the industry to be able to reduce needing wrap bales like this. They provide a service for us because they keep our food dry, which means that it doesn't go off. So we can store it in there. If any rain gets on it, it's not going to spoil because it's in the plastic, but it's still plastic. So an aspiration going forward for myself as a farmer and for many others is to reduce this sort of plastic. And there is some amazing technology out there at the minute. It's not quite mainstream yet, but it is quite exciting. And that would include some edible wrap. So you could put that on and put it out in a field or a shed in the winter, and cows could eat it. So, you know, I just think I have to say, I think that's a really cool idea, and I can't wait to see that come on. The other thing that I really want to show you, sorry, I'm just reaching my hand into this bucket behind me, and then I'm going to step back into the shadows a bit so you're not blinded. The other thing that I really want to show you, which is quite controversial on farms, is this, which I hope you can see in my hand. There. So that is soya. Soya is obviously going to be one of the most controversial things maybe that you will hear about when we're looking at livestock farming. So I'm going to show it to you again so you can have a look. It's not completely soya. There are other bits and pieces in there. This is what we call a blend. So it's like a balanced mix of vitamins, minerals, proteins that we can give to a cow. So I want to highlight soya because, again, this is another aspiration by my farm, by many other farms, by the industry, that we reduce soya. But what I really want to point out is that soya itself is not a bad crop. Using the word soya is not a bad word. It's where we source it from that is really unsustainable. So if we go back to that soya that I just showed you, well over 80% of the soya that we import into the UK goes into human food production. And now we need to remember, soya is not a bad crop, but that's where it tends to go. It will go into human food production, and you will find it in loads of things, soya. It's an exceptional protein, plant-based protein. It is exceptional. Of that 80% then, there is a waste. So that soya will be used for human production, and you will be left with what we call a hull. So you take the main bit of the soya out and you're left with the hull. The hull comes into the livestock industry, and that will, through all livestock, that will come to us, and we will use that waste product so that, remember, we don't want any waste, and it is a very good feed to support cows with. There are some instances where we won't actually buy the hull. We will get the whole soya, and I think that one as an industry is the one where we really need to focus on because it's not a waste product and we are bringing it in. But again, remember, the soya itself is not a bad crop. It's how you source it. So we do have to be quite careful there. You know, we can't just say we can cut it out. So why are we feeding it? What is the point? Dairy cows work quite hard. Remember, they're supporting milk production for you and I. And we need to make sure that they're getting a very balanced diet. So for my cows that are giving the most milk, they will get supported with extra vitamins and minerals. And again, that best product that you can really give them that's the most efficient is soya. So for the time being, the commitment from this farm is that any soya that we do buy in will only come from North American and Canadian farms just like mine, so that it's not coming from the rainforest. That's step one. There are still plenty of steps to go, but you know, it's all about doing what we can as quick as we can. And I'll come on to another bit about what we're doing as well to reduce soya in a second. I'm hoping that you can see some of the rest of my farm here. So we've got some old stone walls, and just over my shoulder, you may or may, oh yes, you should just be able to see above my head. There's some cows out grazing there. So there are a few other cows that I'm just keeping close. They're not quite that close to calving, but I want to keep an eye on them. So they stay in this little paddock here where everybody can see them and keep them safe. And yes, I am carrying a clock around just to make sure I don't go out over time. But yeah, we were talking about how we have modern facilities here on the farm, and that's very important for making sure that we're giving the cows exceptional facilities. But at the same time, farms like mine are surrounded with old facilities, and that doesn't mean that they're any less important. So I thought I would show you what I have to say is my most favourite shed on the farm. I love this barn. I grew up here. I have many really happy childhood memories here. This is a Grade 2 1800s listed barn. It's got a few additions, as you can see, which it would have had back in the day. It's built absolutely dead square from west to east. The slits in the windows, which you may just be able to make out, are for drying. And back in the day when this was more traditional farmland, farmers used to put their crops in there. And then obviously the air would travel through those slits in the windows and take any moisture out and dry those crops. So yeah, I just thought I would show you that really fascinating barn. And I felt that it was fitting to sort of bring the last stage of my conversation about farming. I'll just move into this better, slightly better lighting here. Perhaps just before I do, I'll show you the roof, because it is quite impressive. You are going to have to excuse where the slates have come off. So we repair the slates every year. It's quite complicated because we have to get a cherry picker in to do it. And obviously someone professional to replace those slates. We do it once a year, but you can just see how absolutely stunning this barn is, but not appropriate for the modern dairy cow. Great for storage. As you can see, we're keeping straw in here. We keep some feed in here. So I'm just going to come into the last bit. Although we're in the oldest part of the farm, this is the appropriate time to talk about technology and what we're doing here to make sure that we are improving our carbon footprint. So let's step into this pen here. Oh, likewise, here's some work in progress from earlier. So just because we have big farm machines doesn't mean that there aren't plenty of manual labour that goes on. And I have to say, this is my favourite. Lots of people think I'm pretending when I say that, but I love nothing nicer than just taking 5 minutes in a shed, moving dung. It's a lot more pleasant experience than sitting on a noisy machine sometimes. So I'm in this setting because hopefully it's quiet and hopefully you can hear what I'm going to talk about. I've seen a question go by saying, do I think we'd be able to grow soya in Wales? Last time I looked, there's approximately 800 acres of soya being trialled throughout the UK. And I know of one farm not too far from me who has trialled soya. It hasn't worked very well at the minute. And remember, that crop is designed for southern continents and drier climes than Wales, with different soil. So I suspect in the future, probably it will, or maybe another crop will come on. And actually that's quite interesting because we're getting ready to do a trial here on this farm, looking at a totally different crop, which may rival soya. It's going to be part of an agroforestry system. We will be growing effectively trees, although they look like plants. They're quite stemmy. I suppose they look a bit like a cross between a sapling and a maize plant. We're going to be growing this crop called Sida in rows with other trees. The other trees will be grown, hopefully for building materials for the housing association, or anyone who happens to be building houses. And it's quite exciting. So if we can do some research, working with Bangor University and other businesses, if we can find out whether this crop will work in Wales and will be the replacement for soya, that would be absolutely fantastic. So watch this space, everyone. I will make sure I keep you posted. In the meantime, there are other opportunities to reduce the amount of soy that we use. And this here is probably one of the best bits of kit that lots of farms will have at the moment, whether you are beef, sheep, dairy. If you're growing grass, you'll want one of these. This is a plate meter. It's for measuring grass. So what you do is you carry it. It's a bit like a walking stick. You carry it on this handle here, and you walk along, and you plonk it. You plonk it on the ground, and the plate at the bottom will rise with, depending on how much grass growth you've got there, and that will include the denseness of the grass as well as the height of the grass, and it will rise. Now, it'll tell you how much grass you've got. You measure your grass every week as your livestock is grazing, and you will always have, hopefully, some form of prediction as to how much grass you've got in front of you, how quickly you're going to graze through it. Have you got a problem coming if there's drought or anything like that? And it can help you respond. So a really, really good way of improving your carbon footprint, and a good way if we can utilize grass. Grass has got excellent protein in it as well. The problem is that weather is so variable, it goes up and down a lot, which is why we have to turn to other sources to help balance it out. But that one's a really good one. Another perhaps slightly controversial topic that's worth touching on is using things like these on farms. This is antibiotics. Really important that we are part of that One Health picture, that bigger picture as farmers, of making sure that we are doing everything to reduce our antibiotic usage on farm. So this medicine here, I call it a drug. It's a medicine. This is a penicillin because it's white. What would we use this for? Typically, sometimes if I get a cow who stepped on a stone, she might get a little infection in her foot. And occasionally we might get the odd cow who has a calving-related problem. We might use it for that. I use an app on my phone to monitor and record all of our antibiotic usage, and we aspire to get down to minimal usage in the future. It's always a very difficult one to focus on, because you can't say, I want to use minimal antibiotics. It's not about that. It's about the health of the animal. But my job as a farmer is to make sure that we do everything that we can to prevent the problems that might be coming down the road, and to reduce the reliance on having to use things like this. And certainly here on this farm over the last 5 years, we've cut our antibiotic usage by over 60%, and that's working very much with my vet. We've got a nutritionist here who comes out, but also it's making sure that we get the right nutrition on the farm, and we're not having waste, and our pens are clean, even if it's with a dung fork. It's about all that bigger picture. So I think as an industry, we're just getting a lot better informed about what we do. Other things we do. So I'm a chair of a cattle disease group. It's called CHECS, Cattle Health Certification Standards. And what we do, it's quite an interesting group. It originated from Scotland, and Scotland has got lots of islands, and the islands are particularly vulnerable to disease. So as you can imagine, if you've got some beef animals on an island and you trade them with the mainland, and then you trade back, perhaps they need to buy in some extra genetics. These islands are very vulnerable to getting serious disease breakdowns that could wipe out their home stock, their nucleus on their island. So in Scotland, they had to be very, very, very disease conscious early on. And so they all started developing some fantastic protocols for controlling disease. The problem is everybody was doing something completely different. So there were holes in the net. And what they started to do in Scotland was work together and say, well, actually, we need to do the same thing. So at least we can shut down on some of these holes. So from that, CHECS, the Cattle Health Certification Standards, was born, and we cover the whole of the British Isles, and we try to get anybody who is doing any sort of disease testing for cattle on certain diseases to make sure that we're all doing the same thing, so that at least if farmers are trading animals, they're going to get like for like. And we do all sorts of things. So we can do milk testing. And this is a milk pot here, and there's a little preservative in there, because as you can imagine, if I'm sending this off in the post, I don't want it to go off. We do blood testing. which mostly my vet will take. We take a little bit of blood from the cow's tail, but occasionally I might have to do that if there's an emergency and we need an emergency sample. We can take skin samples, so that would be a little ear tag like this, which you'll put into a sheep or a cow's ear, and it will take a very small skin sample, which will go into this little pot, and we can post that off. That helps us to monitor disease. All of these things, all of this fantastic technology that wasn't around even, well, some of it wasn't even around 10 years ago, is amazing for improving animals' health. Another thing that we keep here on the farm for the dairy cows is this. I like to call it a Fitbit for cows. It goes on their legs. You can see the strap there, and it will monitor how much they move. So it will certainly monitor their activity and their footsteps. But we need to learn a little bit more about it from that. Why are they moving a lot more, or why are they moving a lot less? Are they ill, or are they on heat, or have they broken out? There's all sorts of different pictures that you can pick up from monitoring a cow's activity. And this we bought for our cows just over 6 years ago now. The technology has moved on massively. And when we come to renew these in maybe 3 or 4 years' time, I'm really excited for what we can do going forward, where they have collars where you can listen to a cow's gut as it's turning over, or measuring the pH in the cow's stomach to make sure that they're fit and healthy. These are really important. It interfaces with a computer like this. So this will be a spare interface that we keep. And really good for getting all sorts of data to make sure that we have got total precision. So I can see a question on the screen, which is, what excites you most about the future of dairy farming, and what are your aspirations for your industry? So what excites me most is I think that dairy farming and all livestock farming, which seems to be under a lot of scrutiny at the minute, I think that we have something fantastic to offer to the British public. We are providing a sustainable protein, which, when you think we live in a maritime climate, we are an island, and we do have challenging soils and climate. But my gosh, can we provide an incredible protein for people who choose to eat it, whether that's via red meat, white meat, or milk or eggs. Some fantastic food here in the UK, and the technology that is coming out of people who work in this industry. Remember, if you're thinking about going into the agricultural industry, you don't just have to do farming. You could be that nutritionist, or that person who measures grass. You could be the vet. You could be the person who's developing that technology to make sure that we can get the best out of our animals. There's such a massive range of things you could do in the agricultural industry. And I've seen some incredible people coming towards us now. And also people from outside the industry. Please remember that you do not need to be born onto a farm to become part of this industry. I have just hired an opera singer who is now looking after my calves, and she's doing a fantastic job. And we're ready to welcome anybody into this industry. So I think I put my clock down somewhere. I'm not entirely sure where, but I think my time is coming to an end. I want to thank you, everybody, for listening. Please do make sure that you go out, you buy some British food, which I'm sure if you're watching this, then you're very committed to British food production. Please remember that as an industry, we're working every day to make sure that we do what we need to combat climate change. I think that our opportunities for sequestering carbon, or providing renewables, or just becoming more efficient at what we do is a massive gift that we can offer to society, to make sure that we're part of the solution, not the problem. So thank you so much, everyone, for listening, and enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you again. Thank you.